The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with noise. Hundreds of different alien species sat in their special chairs, each one designed for their unique bodies. Some floated in tanks of glowing liquid. Others stood on multiple legs. A few were just balls of light that pulsed when they spoke. Hyunwoo adjusted his simple human chair and looked around. He was the only human in the massive room. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he wore a plain blue diplomatic uniform. The other species barely looked at him. To them, humans were new and not very important. "The meeting will now begin," announced Elder Vextari. The large reptilian creature had scales that shimmered green and gold. His voice was deep and commanding. "We are here to discuss the ancient laws that keep peace in our galaxy." Hyunwoo listened carefully as the aliens talked about trade routes and mining rights. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up slowly. "The human colonies would like to expand to 3 new systems. We have found planets that no one else is using." Vextari's yellow eyes narrowed. "Humans have only been in space for 200 years. You are still children compared to us. Perhaps you should stay in your small corner of the galaxy." Several aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. Hyunwoo's face stayed calm, but his hands tightened slightly. "We only want to live in peace and trade with everyone." "Peace," said a floating ball of light called Luminar Zeth. "How can such a violent species speak of peace? We have studied your history. You fight wars constantly." Hyunwoo was quiet for a moment. "We have learned from our mistakes. War taught us the value of peace." "Mistakes," hissed Vextari. "Your species cannot be trusted. We will discuss your request later, without you present." On the other side of the galaxy, Mira wiped sweat from her forehead. The sun of Kepler 442b was hot and red. She had been digging in the ruins for 3 months. The ancient city was older than any civilization they knew about. The beings who built it were called the predecessors. No one knew what happened to them. Professor Mira called her assistant, a young man named Jin Ho. "You need to see this." Mira climbed down into the deep hole they had dug. On the wall was writing in a language she had never seen before. But there were other languages too. Some she recognized from old alien civilizations that no longer existed. "What does it say?" Jin Ho asked. Mira ran her fingers over the carved stone. The writing was deep and carefully made. "I'm not sure yet, but this phrase keeps appearing." She pointed to a set of symbols that looked like warning signs. In every language they wrote the same thing over and over. She pulled out her translation device and worked for several hours. Finally, the machine gave her an answer that made her blood run cold. "Do not wake the children of Sol." Jin Ho looked confused. "Sol, that's our son. They're talking about humans?" "But that's impossible," Mira whispered. "These ruins are billions of years old. Humans didn't even exist then." Back on Earth, Admiral Boram stood in the command center on Luna Base. Through the large windows, she could see Earth hanging in space like a blue marble. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back tightly. Her uniform was covered in medals from years of service. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Taemin. He was young but very good at his job. "We're getting strange reports from our intelligence teams." Boram turned to face him. "What kind of reports?" "The alien coalition has been meeting in secret. The Scythic Empire, the Luminari, and the Kresh are talking about humans. They call it the human problem." Boram's expression didn't change, but her eyes grew colder. "Show me everything." Taemin brought up a holographic display. It showed star maps with human colonies marked in blue and alien territories in different colors. "Our spies say they think humans are expanding too fast. They want to stop us." "How many of our people are living in those colonies?" Boram asked. "About 12 million. Families, scientists, farmers. Most of them have never even seen a weapon." Boram was quiet for a long time. She remembered the old days when humans fought each other. Those wars had taught them terrible lessons about what people could do when they were desperate. But it had also taught them how to survive. "Keep watching them," she said finally, "and send a message to General Kyung-soo. Tell him to check on Project Sleeping Giant." Taemin looked surprised. "Admiral, that project was classified at the highest level. I didn't even know it still existed." "It exists," Boram said quietly. "Let's hope we never need to use it." Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council chambers, the meeting continued without Hyunwoo. The human ambassador sat in a small waiting room outside. He could not hear what the aliens were saying, but he knew it was not good. Inside the chamber, Vextari addressed the other leaders. "The humans are becoming a problem. They build colonies faster than we can track them. They learn our languages and our technology too quickly. Their minds work differently than ours, added Creche Queen Zixandra. Her insect-like body clicked as she spoke. They adapt to any situation. This makes them dangerous, Luminarzeth pulsed brightly. We have studied their military history. They are incredibly violent. When humans go to war, they do not stop until their enemy is completely destroyed. But they seem peaceful now, said a smaller alien from the back of the room. Bextari's laugh was like rocks grinding together. That is what makes them so dangerous. They pretend to be peaceful while they spread across the galaxy like a disease. The vote was quick. Every species except 3 small ones voted to approve the containment protocol. Humans would not be allowed to expand further. If they tried, they would be stopped by force. Back on Kepler 442b, Mira made another discovery. Deep in the ruins, she found a room filled with stone tablets. Each tablet told a story. As she translated them, a picture began to form in her mind. The predecessors had been the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. They had ruled over thousands of worlds for millions of years, but something had destroyed them completely. The tablets told of a war that lasted only 50 years but left entire solar systems empty. Jinho, she called. Look at this. The young man read over her shoulder as she translated the ancient text. They came from the 3rd world of the Yellow Star. At first we thought they were weak. They had no great technology, no powerful weapons. They seemed to want only peace. Mira continued reading. But when we took their children as slaves, something changed. They did not fight us with ships or armies. They fought us with ideas. They turned our own people against us. They made us destroy ourselves. The last tablet was the most frightening. We were fools. We thought they were like us, but they are something else. They do not just fight wars. They win them completely. Every time. No matter the cost. Warn others. Do not wake the children of Sol. Do not make them angry. On Luna Base, Admiral Boram received a coded message from Hyunwoo. The Galactic Council had voted. Humans were now considered a threat to galactic peace. All human expansion was forbidden. She looked out at Earth again. Down there, billions of humans lived their normal lives. They went to work, raised their children, and dreamed of exploring the stars. They had no idea that the rest of the galaxy saw them as monsters. But Boram knew better. She had studied human history. She knew what her species was capable of when pushed too far. The aliens thought they were being clever by limiting human expansion. They thought they were preventing a war. They had no idea they were starting one. Admiral, Taman said quietly, what are your orders? Boram was silent for a long time. Then she turned away from the window. Send a message to all human colonies. Tell them to be ready and activate our sleeper agents throughout alien space. All of them? Taman asked. All of them, Boram confirmed. It's time to show the galaxy why the predecessors left those warnings. 3 months passed quietly. Human colonies continued their normal lives, unaware of the danger growing around them. Children played in the streets of New Sol Colony. Farmers worked in the fields of New Busan. Scientists studied strange new plants on Terra Nova. Everything seemed peaceful. Then the Scythic Empire struck without warning. The first attack came at dawn in the Vega system. 5 human colony ships were traveling to establish a new settlement. Each ship carried 10,000 people, families with young children, elderly couples, teachers, doctors, and engineers. They were all civilians with no weapons. Captain Wusiak was drinking his morning coffee on the bridge of the colony ship. Hope of Earth, when his sensors detected something wrong. Captain, called his navigation officer. I'm reading 15 large ships approaching fast. Wusiak put down his coffee and looked at the display. The ships were huge, much larger than anything humans had ever built. Their design was clearly Scythic, all sharp angles and dark metal. This is Captain Wusiak of the human vessel Hope of Earth. He broadcast on all frequencies. We are a civilian colony ship. We mean no harm to anyone. The response came in the harsh, grinding voice of a Scythic commander. Humans, you have been judged a threat to galactic peace. Your expansion ends here. We have families aboard, Wusiak said desperately. Children and elderly people. We're just looking for a new home. Then you should have stayed on Earth. The Scythic ships opened fire. Their energy weapons cut through the human ships like paper. Wusiak had time to send one last message before his ship exploded. Tell Earth. Tell them we tried to be peaceful. In 15 minutes, 50,000 humans died. The Scythic commander broadcast the attack across the galaxy as a warning to other species. The message was clear. This is what happens to those who challenge the established order. On New Busan colony, Ji-won was working in the communications center when the emergency alert came through. She was a young woman with kind eyes who had volunteered to help coordinate supply shipments between human colonies. She loved her quiet job and the peaceful life on New Busan. The message from Earth was short and terrible. Vega colony ships destroyed. All colonies to high alert status. Prepare for possible attack. Ji-won stared at the screen in shock. 50,000 people dead. People just like her neighbors. People who had never hurt anyone. Before she could react, alarms began sounding throughout the colony. Through the windows, she could see large alien ships descending from the sky. They were not Scythic ships. These were different, organic-looking like giant insects. Kresh ships, whispered her assistant Minho. Why are they here? The answer came quickly. Kresh warriors began landing throughout the colony. They were 7 feet tall with hard shells and multiple arms ending in sharp claws. They carried energy weapons and moved with frightening coordination. Attention, humans, came a voice over the colony's communication system. You will surrender immediately. Any resistance will result in your destruction. Ji-won grabbed the emergency transmitter. This is New Busan colony to Earth Command. We are under attack by Kresh forces. They are taking civilians prisoner. Please send help. Before she could say more, the communication center door exploded inward. 3 Kresh warriors entered, their insect eyes focusing on her. Step away from the equipment, one of them clicked in broken human language. Ji-won raised her hands. We are civilians. We have done nothing wrong. You are human, the warrior replied. That is enough. On Earth, President Dong-hyun stood before the United Earth Parliament. He was an older man with gray hair and a face marked by years of difficult decisions. The Parliament chamber was full of representatives from every nation on Earth. All of them were angry and demanding action. Citizens of Earth, Dong-hyun began, his voice calm but carrying clearly through the chamber. 3 hours ago, 50,000 of our people were murdered without warning. They were civilians. They were families. They were innocent. The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Representatives demanded immediate military action. Some called for the entire alien coalition to be declared enemies of humanity. Dong-hyun waited for quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder. The aliens believe they can intimidate us with displays of violence. They believe we will bow to their threats and stay quietly in our corner of the galaxy. He paused and looked around the chamber. Every person was listening intently. They are wrong. They have chosen to test us. They will learn why our ancestors wrote warnings about our species. They will learn why the ancient predecessors feared the children of Sol. The president touched a button on his podium. I am authorizing the activation of all dormant military protocols. Admiral Boram, you have full authority to respond as you see fit. On Luna Base, Admiral Boram received the authorization codes. Around her, the command center was buzzing with activity. Officers were pulling up star charts and fleet positions. Communication specialists were contacting human colonies across the galaxy. Admiral, said Lieutenant Taman, all human colonies are reporting increased alien military activity. It looks like they're planning coordinated attacks. Boram nodded grimly. How many of our people are in danger? Approximately 12 million spread across 47 colonies. And how many of our sleeper agents are in position throughout alien space? Taman checked his files. Over 2,000. They've been in place for decades, working as merchants, scientists, and cultural attachés. Boram smiled coldly. The aliens think they know us. They think we are just another species that will submit when threatened. They have studied our military history and seen only our wars against each other. She turned to face her staff. They don't understand the most important lesson from human history. We don't just fight wars. We win them, completely, every time. Boram activated her command console. Send activation codes to all sleeper agents. Operation Sleeping Giant is now active. Far across the galaxy on the planet Kepler 442b, Mira was still working in the ancient ruins. But now her research had taken on new urgency. The message from Earth about the attacks had reached her that morning. Jin-ho, she called to her assistant. I need you to help me with something important. The young man joined her at the translation table. They had found dozens more tablets with warnings about humans. Each one told the same story from a different perspective. Look at this one. Mira said, pointing to a newly translated tablet. This was written by a predecessor general. He says they defeated human armies easily at first. Human technology was simple. Human ships were small. Jinho read over her shoulder. But then it says something changed. The humans stopped fighting fair battles. Exactly. The predecessors expected traditional warfare, fleet against fleet, army against army. But humans fought differently. Mira pulled up another translation. This tablet says humans infiltrated predecessor society. They learned their languages, their customs, their fears. They became spies? More than spies. They became part of predecessor civilization, and then they used that knowledge to destroy it from within. Mira showed Jinho the final tablet. It says humans convinced different predecessor factions to fight each other. They turned their greatest strength, their unity, into their greatest weakness. Jinho was quiet for a moment. Professor, do you think that's what's happening now? Are we doing the same thing to the current aliens? Mira looked at the ancient warnings carved in stone. I don't think we're doing anything, Jinho. I think we already did it. Years ago, maybe decades ago. She pulled up a star chart on her portable computer. Look at this. For the past 50 years, humans have been sending cultural ambassadors, trade representatives, and scientists to every major alien civilization. You think they were all spies? I think they were preparing, just in case someone was foolish enough to provoke us. Mira looked at the ancient warnings again. The predecessors tried to warn future civilizations. They wrote these messages in stone so they would last forever. But the aliens didn't listen. No, Mira said quietly. They didn't listen. And now they're about to learn the same lesson the predecessors learned. Back on New Busan Colony, Jiwon and the other humans were being herded into a large building that the creche had converted into a prison. Families were separated. Children were crying for their parents. The elderly were struggling to keep up with the forced march. But Jiwon noticed something the creche guards didn't. As they walked through the colony, she saw human maintenance workers still at their jobs. The aliens were letting them continue working to keep the colony systems running. One of the workers, a man named Sung Min, caught her eye for just a moment. His expression was calm, almost knowing. He gave her the smallest possible nod before looking away. Jiwon realized something that made her feel hopeful for the first time since the attack began. The creche thought they had captured a defenseless farming colony. They had no idea what they had really walked into. As the prison door closed behind her, Jiwon smiled grimly. The aliens had made their choice. They had decided to test humanity's resolve with the blood of innocence. They were about to learn why that was a mistake. The human response did not come with great fleets or armies. It began with whispers. On the Scythic homeworld, General Vraktar was reviewing invasion plans when his communication system failed. The holographic displays flickered and went dark. Emergency lights came on, casting the command center in red shadows. What happened? Vraktar demanded. His communications officer, a younger Scythic named Zefkol, worked frantically at his console. I don't know, General. The entire network just shut down. We're completely cut off from our fleets. Across the galaxy, similar failures were happening on dozens of alien worlds. The Luminary found their energy distribution systems experiencing random shutdowns. Creche hive worlds reported food production facilities going offline. The alien coalition's carefully planned invasion was falling apart before it could truly begin. But these were not random failures. They were the work of Tai Min and his network of human operatives. Insu had been a merchant on the Luminary world of Prism for 15 years. Everyone knew him as a friendly human who traded in rare crystals and told amusing stories about his home planet. The Luminary considered him harmless, almost a pet. Human who provided entertainment, they had no idea he was one of the most dangerous people in the galaxy. Insu's small shop was located near the central power distribution facility. For years he had been studying Luminary technology while pretending to be interested only in pretty crystals. The Luminary were beings of pure energy, who had built their entire civilization around manipulating light and power. They thought their technology was too advanced for other species to understand. They were wrong. I'm sorry, my friends, Insu said quietly as he activated the device he had hidden in his shop's basement. You should not have hurt our children. The device was simple but elegant. It used the Luminary's own energy distribution network against them. Instead of providing power to their cities, the network began feeding power back into itself in an endless loop. The The system overloaded in minutes. Across Prism, Luminari cities went dark. Their ships, unable to recharge their energy cores, became helpless in space. Thousands of vessels that were supposed to attack human colonies found themselves stranded and powerless. Insu watched the chaos from his shop window. Luminari beings flickered weakly as they tried to understand what had happened. Some were already fading as their energy reserves ran low. He activated his secret communicator. "Control, this is Merchant 7. The Luminari fleet is neutralized." Proceeding to secondary objectives. Meanwhile, on the creche world of Terminus, Dr. Seung-ho was having very different problems. He had spent 10 years working as an agricultural scientist, helping the insectoid creche improve their food production. The creche trusted him because he had solved several famine problems and saved millions of their larvae. What they didn't know was that Seung-ho had been preparing for this day since his arrival. The creche were a hive mind species. All their food was produced in massive central facilities and then distributed to the population through automated systems. It was efficient but also vulnerable. Seung-ho had spent years mapping every food production facility, every distribution center, and every storage depot. He had also been carefully modifying the automated systems, adding hidden programs that would activate on his command. "Computer," he said to his laboratory terminal, "execute Protocol Harvest Moon." Across Terminus, the food distribution network began to malfunction. Storage facilities locked their doors and refused to open. Processing plants shut down their production lines. Distribution vehicles broke down simultaneously in remote locations. Within hours, the creche population began to panic. They were used to having food delivered automatically to their hives. When the deliveries stopped, they didn't know what to do. Seung-ho watched the chaos with mixed feelings. He didn't enjoy causing suffering, but the creche had chosen to make war on innocent humans. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "but you started this." The creche military commanders tried to maintain order, but hungry hive workers were difficult to control. Soon, creche soldiers were being pulled away from their invasion fleets to deal with food riots on their own worlds. Back in the Galactic Council chambers, Elder Vextari was receiving increasingly desperate reports from his military commanders. "What do you mean the humans haven't launched any ships?" he roared at his intelligence chief. "Exactly that, Elder. Our scouts report no unusual military activity from human space. Their fleets are still in normal positions around Earth and Luna. Then how are our systems failing?" The intelligence chief looked uncomfortable. "We believe it may be sabotage, Elder, but we don't know how they're doing it." Vexitari's yellow eyes narrowed. "Find out. And find out quickly." But it was already too late. The damage was spreading faster than the aliens could track it. On the industrial world of Forge Prime, Changmin had been working as a computer systems specialist for 8 years. The Scythec had hired him because humans were good with technology and worked cheaply. They treated him like a useful tool rather than a person. Changmin had used those 8 years well. He had gained access to every major computer system on the planet. More importantly, he had learned to think like a Scythec. The reptilian aliens were proud and hierarchical. They believed in absolute order and obedience to authority. Their entire society was built around following commands from their superiors without question. Changmin activated his most sophisticated program. It was not a virus or a direct attack. Instead, it was a series of fake command orders that appeared to come from Scythic High Command. The orders were subtle at first. Ships were told to report to different locations for routine maintenance. Military units were ordered to new positions for training exercises. Supply convoys were rerouted for efficiency improvements. Each order seemed reasonable by itself, but together they created chaos. Military units arrived at empty bases. Ships gathered at locations with no supplies. Entire fleets found themselves in the wrong solar systems with no way to contact their commanders. The Scythec military machine, famous for its precision and discipline, began to tear itself apart through its own obedience. Changmin smiled as he watched the confusion spread. "Discipline is a strength," he said to himself, "but it can also be a weakness." On Earth, Admiral Boram was receiving reports from agents across the galaxy. Each report was better than the last. "Admiral," Lieutenant Taman said excitedly, "the Luminari invasion fleet is completely disabled. The Kresh are dealing with civil unrest on their homeworlds. The Scythic military is in complete disarray. And we haven't fired a single shot," Boram noted with satisfaction. The alien leadership is starting to panic. They're trying to figure out how we're attacking them without any visible military action. Boram nodded. They expected us to fight like them. They expected traditional warfare. Fleet against fleet, army against army. They never considered that we might fight like humans. She activated her communication system. This is Admiral Boram to all agents. Phase 1 is complete. Begin Phase 2. Across the galaxy, humans who had lived quietly among alien populations for years began to reveal their true nature. They were not just merchants, scientists, and cultural attachés. They were the most sophisticated intelligence network the galaxy had ever seen, and they knew their alien neighbors better than the aliens knew themselves. On New Busan Colony, G1 was still imprisoned with the other colonists, but she had been watching the creche guards carefully. They seemed nervous and distracted. Some of them were talking in their clicking language about problems back home. She also noticed that the human maintenance workers were still moving freely around the colony. Every few hours, one of them would walk past the prison building and make eye contact with someone inside. Late that night, the lights in the prison building began to flicker. The creche guards assumed it was a minor power problem and ignored it. But G1 noticed that the flickering followed a pattern: 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. It was an ancient human signal. SOS, the maintenance workers were sending a message. Help was coming. Sungmin, the maintenance worker who had nodded to her earlier, appeared at a window and held up 5 fingers. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Ji-won understood. In 5 minutes something would happen. She began quietly passing the word to other prisoners, using hand signals and whispers. When the 5 minutes were up, every electronic system in the creche compound failed simultaneously. Lights went out. Security doors unlocked. Communication equipment died. Even the weapons carried by the guards stopped working. In the darkness, Ji-won heard Sungmin's voice. Stay calm and follow the sound of my voice. We're getting you out of here. As the colonists began moving toward freedom, Ji-won realized something important. The creche had thought they were capturing a helpless farming colony. They had never suspected that every human colony, no matter how small or peaceful, was defended by people who had been preparing for this day for years. The aliens had provoked the wrong species, and now they were learning what that mistake would cost them. The human counterattack was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. There were no massive space battles or grand fleet movements. Instead, humanity waged war in ways that struck at the very heart of what made each alien species function. Captain Wu Jin led his team of 12 human Marines toward the Sithic dreadnought Bone Crusher. The massive ship hung dead in space, its crew unaware of the danger approaching. The humans wore simple spacesuits with basic equipment. To any observer, they looked like a minor boarding party. They were much more than that. Remember, Wu Jin told his team over their private communication channel, we're not here to fight them. We're here to make them fight themselves. The Marines cut through the dreadnought's hull using standard plasma torches. When the Scythic security teams arrived to repel the boarders, they found something unexpected. The humans were not carrying weapons. Instead, they carried small metal containers. What are those? Demanded Scythic Commander Grexaval as his soldiers surrounded the humans. Wu Jin smiled calmly. Medical supplies. Your crew is about to get very sick. Before Grexaval could respond, Wu Jin opened his container. A fine mist sprayed out and spread through the ship's air system. The Scythic soldiers immediately raised their weapons, but Wu Jin held up his hands. Go ahead and shoot us, he said. But it won't help. The mist is already in your air supply. What have you done? Grexaval hissed. We studied your biology for 50 years, Wu Jin explained as Scythic soldiers began to feel dizzy. We learned that your immune system is very strong but also very specific. It fights off Scythic diseases perfectly, but it doesn't know how to handle Earth viruses. The virus Wu Jin had released was not designed to kill. Instead, it caused confusion, memory loss, and paranoia. Within hours, the Scythic crew began to suspect each other of treachery. By the end of the day, different sections of the ship were fighting each other. The mighty dreadnought became a floating madhouse. Other Scythic ships tried to help, but their crews were infected when they came aboard. Soon, the entire Scythic fleet was consumed by internal fighting. Meanwhile, in the energy realm where the Luminari lived, engineer Ye Jin was putting her own plan into action. She had spent 15 years studying how the Luminari existed as beings of pure energy. Everyone thought she was just fascinated by their unique nature. In reality, she had been learning how to weaponize it. The luminary communicated by sharing energy patterns. It was beautiful and efficient, but it was also vulnerable. Yejin had discovered that she could introduce false patterns into their communication network. "What are you doing, human friend?" asked Luminar Zeth as Yejin worked at a control console. "I'm trying to boost your communication signal," Yejin lied smoothly. "Your fleet commanders are having trouble reaching their ships." Zeth pulsed with appreciation. "You are always so helpful to us." Yejin smiled sadly. "I wish you had been more helpful to our children." She activated her device. Immediately, false signals began flooding the Luminary communication network. But these were not random signals. They were carefully crafted to exploit the Luminary's deepest fears. The Luminary were beings of light, but they lived in constant fear of darkness. The false signals contained patterns that suggested their energy was being drained away. Soon, Luminary across their empire began to panic. They started hoarding their energy instead of sharing it. Without shared energy, Luminary society collapsed. Their ships went dark. Their cities flickered and died. In trying to save themselves from an imaginary threat, they destroyed their own civilization. The Kresh faced a different kind of attack. Cyber warfare specialist Chang Min had discovered something fascinating about their hive mind. While all Kresh shared thoughts, they had never experienced individual thinking. The concept was completely foreign to them. Chang Min introduced new thoughts into their collective consciousness. Not commands or orders, but something much more dangerous. Questions. What if the hive is wrong? Was the first thought he planted. Why should I obey orders I don't understand? Was the second. What if I could make my own choices? Was the third. For a species that had never experienced doubt, these thoughts were like poison. Individual Kresh began to question the hive's decisions. Some refused to follow orders. Others started making their own plans. The Kresh military machine, which depended on perfect unity and coordination, began to fall apart. Units refused to attack human colonies because individual soldiers had decided the war was wrong. Generals found themselves arguing with their own officers about strategy. The hive mind that had been the Kresh's greatest strength became their greatest weakness. Back on New Busan colony, Jiwon was leading the rescued colonists through the dark tunnels beneath their settlement. The Kresh guards were running around in confusion above them, trying to restore power to their equipment. "How did you know these tunnels were here?" asked Minho, her former assistant. "Every human colony has them," explained Sung Min, the maintenance worker who had organized their escape. "Emergency shelters, hidden supply caches, communication equipment. We've been preparing for this possibility since the first colony was established." Jiwon looked at him with new understanding. "You're not really a maintenance worker, are you?" Sung Min smiled grimly. "I'm whatever I need to be. Right now, I'm someone who's very angry about what happened to our people in the Vega system." They reached a hidden chamber filled with communication equipment and supplies. Sungmin began activating systems that Jiwon had never known existed. "New Busan base to Luna Command." He spoke into a secure transmitter. "Package delivered. Guests are very unhappy with their accommodations." Admiral Boram's voice came back clearly. "Understood. New Busan base, room service is on the way." "Room service?" Jiwon asked. Sungmin pointed upward. Through a concealed periscope, they could see the Kresh compound. But now there were new figures moving in the shadows, humans in dark clothing who seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. "The Kresh think they're dealing with frightened farmers," Sungmin explained. "They have no idea that half our colonists are actually military specialists who volunteered for deep cover assignments." Above them, the Kresh guards were discovering that their prisoners had vanished completely. Worse, their own equipment kept malfunctioning in impossible ways. Weapons jammed. Communication devices played strange music. Food supplies developed mysterious chemical reactions that made them inedible. The psychological pressure was enormous. The Kresh were used to fighting enemies they could see and understand. Fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere was driving them to desperation. In the Galactic Council chambers, the alien leaders were finally beginning to understand what they had unleashed. "How are they doing this?" Elder Vextari demanded. His scales had lost their shine and his voice cracked with stress. "Our entire military is falling apart and we haven't seen a single human warship." "They're not fighting us," said Kresh Queen Zixandra, her clicking voice filled with confusion. "They're making us fight ourselves." Luminar Zeth flickered weakly. My people are afraid to share energy. They think it will be stolen from them. Our entire civilization is based on sharing energy. It's impossible, Vexitari insisted. No species could plan something this complex. It would take decades of preparation. Maybe it did, said a small voice from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned to look at Ambassador Hyunwoo. The human had been silent during the emergency session, simply listening to the alien leader's panic. What did you say? Vextari hissed. Hyunwoo stood up slowly. His calm expression had not changed, but something in his eyes was different. I said maybe it did take decades. Maybe we have been planning for this possibility since the day we first met you. That's impossible. You were peaceful. You wanted trade and friendship? We did want those things, Hyunwoo agreed, but we also studied you. Every diplomatic meeting, every cultural exchange, every trade agreement taught us something new about how you think and how you live. He walked toward the center of the chamber. The alien leaders watched him nervously. You studied our history and saw only violence. You missed the most important lesson. Humans don't just fight wars. We learn from them. Every war we fought against each other taught us new ways to understand our enemies. Vextari's voice was barely a whisper. What do you want? We wanted peace, Hyunwoo said simply. You chose war. Now you're learning why the ancient predecessors warned against provoking us. He activated a small device on his wrist. This is Ambassador Hyunwoo to Luna Command. The aliens would like to discuss terms. Admiral Bo-Ram's voice filled the chamber. Tell them the terms are simple. Unconditional surrender and reparations for the civilians they murdered. They have 24 hours to decide. The alien leaders looked at each other in despair. Their mighty coalition had been destroyed without a single human warship leaving port. Their own strengths had been turned against them with surgical precision. They had provoked the children of Sol. Now they understood why the ancient warnings had been carved in stone to last forever. The war ended not with explosions and battles, but with broken minds and shattered confidence. Across the galaxy, the alien coalition discovered that fighting humans was like fighting their own shadows. The more they struggled, the more they hurt themselves. Elder Vextari sat alone in his command chamber on the Scythic homeworld. Through his window he could see the capital city burning, not from human weapons but from his own people fighting each other. The virus that the humans had released wasn't killing anyone, but it was destroying their ability to trust one another. His communication device activated. The image of his own general, Thekmar, appeared on the screen. But Thekmar's eyes were wild with paranoia. Elder, the general hissed, I know you're planning to betray me to the humans. I've seen the secret messages. There are no secret messages, Vextari said wearily. The human virus is making you see things that aren't there. Lies. Thekmar screamed. I'm taking control of the fleet. You can't be trusted. The transmission ended. Vextari knew that within hours, his own military would be fighting a civil war. The humans had turned the Sithek's greatest strength, their military discipline, into their greatest weakness. Orders were no longer trusted. Leaders were suspected of treachery. The chain of command had broken down completely. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Vextari expected another paranoid rant from one of his officers. Instead, he saw the face of a human he recognized, Insu, the crystal merchant who had lived peacefully on Luminari worlds for years. Hello, Elder Vextari, Insu said politely. I hope you're having a pleasant day. You, Vextari whispered. You've been planning this for years. Decades, actually, Insu confirmed. Did you know that every human merchant in your territory has been mapping your infrastructure? Every human scientist studying your technology? Every human diplomat learning your psychology? Vextari's scales turned pale. Impossible. We watched you. You were harmless. We appeared harmless because that's what you expected to see. You never considered that we might be exactly what we appeared to be and something else entirely at the same time. On the screen, Insu held up a small device. This is the remote control for every critical system in your empire. Power plants, communication networks, transportation hubs. With one button I can shut down your entire civilization. What do you want? Vextari asked desperately. Nothing that we didn't ask for peacefully years ago. Trade, friendship, the right to live and expand without interference. Insu's expression grew cold. You chose to answer our peaceful requests with the murder of 50,000 civilians. Now you learn the price of that choice. Meanwhile, on the Kresh homeworld of Terminus, Queen Zixandra was experiencing the collapse of everything she had ever known. The hive mind that connected all Kresh was fragmenting as individual thoughts spread like an infection. Dr. Shung Ho stood before her in the throne chamber. For 10 years, she had thought of him as a helpful human who improved their food production. Now she realized he had been studying their society with the patience of a scientist examining insects under a microscope. Why? She clicked desperately. We gave you sanctuary. We allowed you to work among us. You allowed me to serve you, Sung Ho corrected. You never saw me as an equal. To you, I was just a useful animal. Around them, individual Kresh workers were wandering in confusion. Cut off from the hive mind, they didn't know how to function. Some were trying to make decisions on their own and failing. Others were paralyzed by the freedom to choose. The thoughts you introduced, Zixandra said. The questions about individuality, how? Humans have always struggled with the balance between individual freedom and collective cooperation. We understand both concepts deeply. Your species chose only collective thinking. That made you strong, but it also made you fragile. Sung Ho activated a device that restored partial connection to the hive mind. Immediately, the confused Kresh began to function again. But now they carried the memory of individual thought. The hive mind would never be the same. Consider this a gift, Sung Ho said. The ability to think for yourselves. Use it wisely. In the energy realm of the Luminari, Engineer Ye-Jin was meeting with the surviving leaders of their civilization. The beings of light flickered weakly, afraid to share energy with each other after the false signals had convinced them that connection meant destruction. We don't understand, whispered Luminar. Zeth. How did you know our fears so precisely? Because we listened, Ye-Jin replied. For 15 years I lived among you. I heard your stories, your myths, your deepest concerns. Every species has fears that define them. Yours is the fear of darkness, of losing your light. But you used our fear to destroy us. No, Ye-Jin said firmly. I used your fear to teach you a lesson. You're not destroyed. You're just learning that trust is fragile and precious. When you rebuild, remember that. She activated a device that cleared the false signals from their communication network. Slowly, carefully, the Luminari began to share energy again, but now they did so with caution and respect, knowing how easily their connections could be broken. On Earth, President Dong Hyun stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council. The meeting was being held virtually, as travel was impossible with so many alien civilizations dealing with internal chaos. Citizens of the galaxy, he began, his voice reaching every world through the emergency broadcast system. 3 months ago, your leaders chose to test humanity's resolve. They believed we would submit to their threats and remain quietly in our assigned place. The alien leaders on the screen looked defeated and exhausted. Their proud civilizations had been brought to their knees without a single human weapon being fired in anger. They were wrong. They forgot the oldest rule in the galaxy: never provoke the humans. Today you remember why that rule exists. Elder Vextari spoke from his burning capital. What are your terms? The same terms we offered peacefully years ago, Dong Hyun replied. Mutual respect, fair trade, the right for all species to expand and grow without interference, and reparations for the innocent. Lives you took, added Admiral Boram from Luna, base. 50,000 civilians died because of your arrogance. Their families deserve justice. Kresh Queen Zixandra clicked nervously. What guarantee do we have that you won't destroy us completely? President Dong Hyun was quiet for a moment. The same guarantee we gave you before, our word. We are not conquerors. We never wanted to rule over you. We only wanted to live in peace. But if you threaten us again, Admiral Boram added, remember what happened today. Remember how easily we dismantled your civilizations without firing a shot. Remember that every human in your territory might be watching and learning. On New Busan colony, G1 stood in the rebuilt communications center. The Kresh forces had been evacuated after their commanders realized they were fighting ghosts. The colony was free, but the memory of occupation would remain. It's hard to believe it's over, said Minho, who was helping to coordinate relief supplies from Earth. Is it over? Ji-won asked. She looked out the window at Sung Min, who was back to his cover identity as a maintenance worker. But now she knew what he really was. How many others like him are there? How long have we been preparing for something like this? Sung-min approached their window and smiled. For a moment, Ji-won saw something in his eyes that reminded her of Admiral Boram's cold determination. Maybe that's the point. she whispered. Maybe they're supposed to wonder. Far across the galaxy on Kepler 442b, Mira was adding new inscriptions to the predecessor ruins. She carved them carefully in multiple languages, including human script. "What are you writing?" Jinho asked. Mira stepped back to admire her work. The message was simple but clear. They were given every chance for peace. They chose war. They learned why that was a mistake. Below that, she added a new warning. The children of Sol are patient. They prefer friendship to conquest, but they remember every kindness and every cruelty. Choose wisely, Jinho read the inscription. Do you think future civilizations will listen? Some will, Mira said. Others will decide to test us just like the Coalition did. But now they'll have two sets of warnings to ignore. She looked up at the red sun of Kepler 442b. Somewhere out there, human colonies were expanding again. Trade ships were carrying goods between human and alien worlds. Children were being born under strange suns, growing up in a galaxy where humanity was no longer underestimated. The aliens thought they knew us, Mira continued. They studied our history and saw only violence. They missed the most important lesson, which is, humans learn. From every war, every conflict, every mistake, we learn how to understand our enemies better than they understand themselves. And then we use that knowledge to end conflicts as quickly and efficiently as possible. Mira gathered her tools and prepared to leave the ruins. The oldest rule in the galaxy exists for a reason. Not because humans are monsters, but because we're something much more dangerous. What's that? We're survivors. And we're very, very good at teaching others how to survive too. As they walked away from the ancient warnings, human ships were already spreading to the stars again. But now they carried new passengers. Alien diplomats, scientists, and merchants who wanted to learn from humanity instead of fighting them. The galaxy had learned its lesson.